Hey everybody, this is a non-scripted video that I'm going to be doing in one take where I'm going to be talking about a lot of different things that are completely related. There's a lot of information to cover. Nobody else is talking about these issues in this way, but I'm actually making this video because the issues contained in it are very important to me. And, pardon me. And because of time management issues, I'm doing this in one take. I might end up doing some more videos like this in kind of a single take where I'm just having a conversation rather than scripting them out like I have been, again, because of time management issues. Now, I will say this. Because the issues covered in this video are important to me, they're sensitive material, I'm probably going to rant a little bit. And I would also say this. The content of this video is important, so share it where you can, share it where you feel comfortable as your conscience allows. If this video gets taken off of YouTube, which there's a very good chance it might, it will also be up at my channel on BitChute and on Brighteon. Now, the links to those alternate sites are located at misandrytoday.com. So go ahead and go to my website at misandrytoday.com and you'll get my links to both BitChute and Brighteon. You can also get my links to Gab and Minds.com there as well, hashtag shill alert. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So back in May of this year, I made this video on illegal immigration called Illegal Immigrant Smugglers Should Be Prosecuted. Now, in the video, I talked about Pueblos Sin Fronteras, which is the group that is smuggling illegal immigrants into the United States. I talked about how they're using chartered buses, they hired armed security, and in addition to that, I talked about how MS-13, the international Mexican gang, or I won't say Mexican gang, but Latino gang rather, has been using the migrant caravans to sneak into the United States. And I also talked a little bit about how People Without Borders have been telling migrants to enter into sham marriages and to pretend to be families so that they could falsely get everybody in to the United States under fraud. So the reason that this is important is because when we talk about Pueblos Sin Fronteras, let's move on to NBC News. Now, Pueblos Sin Fronteras, according to NBC News, and I think this is done in, April 4th, 2018, they've been actually creating these migrant caravans for 15 years. According to Rodrigo Abeja, I think that's how you pronounce his name. My Spanish is dog shit. I'm a horrible Latino. He's one of the lead organizers of Pueblos Sin Fronteras, and he says that they've basically been creating these caravans for over 15 years to try to sneak these people into the United States. Now, even though you can kind of look at the article and the links will be in the description below of all these articles, there's a couple things I want to touch on. And the most important thing, in addition to the fact that this NBC News article actually confirms what I was saying in my video, they also talk about right here where I've got it highlighted, Pueblos Sin Fronteras runs a shelter for migrants. Now, what that means is that they're basically harboring federal criminals. Now, they don't say where these shelters are. They might be in the United States. They might be in Central America, but they are harboring illegal immigrants. In other words, they're harboring federal criminals. Now, what the other thing that's interesting is that if you continue farther down, it says, Abejas said the Hondurans in the caravan are fleeing the continuing political crisis and violence there that escalated in November with the election of President Juan Orlando Hernandez. His election is seen as rigged and was followed by violent protests that were shut down with a military-enforced curfew. Now, I want you to remember that because that's going to be important later in this video. Here's the thing. They said that Trump's election was rigged. So, all of a sudden there was Russian collusion and everything else. And so these people are like, you know what? We're going to protest. We're going to lose our shit in the middle of the street. And the government said, you know what? We're going to bring out the military and let you understand exactly what we think about that sort of thing. So this is a huge thing because basically their government, in effect, what they're saying between the lines is that their government cracked down on their communist propaganda. So now they're going to go ahead and they're going to leave their country and they're going to go ahead and try to do this shit in the United States instead. Now, we're going to kind of move on. And again, I'm just going to touch on a couple things on some articles that are extremely important, and then we're going to move to the next one. So the next most important thing that we're going to talk about is how a filmmaker named Amy Horowitz, and this is from glenbeck.com. So the title of the article, of course, you can see on your screen, is Bombshell Filmmaker Amy Horowitz Blows the Lid Off of Media's Deceit About the Migrant Caravan. This article was published on November 30th, 2018. And then I'm just going to touch on a couple parts of it. It says filmmaker Amy Horowitz headed to Mexico to take a first-hand look at the caravan of migrants from Central America. He shared what he learned with Glenn on Thursday's The Glenn Beck radio program. Now, this is him talking. There are so many layers. I'm sorry, let's try this one more time. There are so many layers of this onion, it's hard to know where to begin. I think the most important thing is the complicity that the mainstream media has with the organizers of this caravan, which, by the way, is Pueblos Sin Frontera. A little spoiler alert there. You can go on and on about how disingenuous the media is on this. The media will have you believe that this is some kind of organic groundswell of people who decided at the same time, we're going to form a caravan and we're going to form a caravan and go to America. That's the narrative you hear from the media. Again, nothing could be further from the truth. This was organized from the beginning. There are literally lines and lines of these chartered buses that take people from place to place, which, again, is something I talked about in my video, and I actually showed pictures of the chartered buses. There's mobile hospitals. There are armies of trucks and vehicles moving food, water, and equipment. Glenn asked about Pueblos Sin Fronteras, a Soros-funded group known to have organized and sponsored the caravan of South American migrants in April. Oh, this is their caravan, asserted Ami. They are the sponsors. They're the organizers. They are the ones that put this whole thing together. This is not a secret, he added. It's not like I found something that It's not like I found something that nobody else could find. You just show up with a camera and this is what's out there. It's laid out for you. There are hundreds of these workers. It's not like it's one or two kind of hiding in the bushes. They're all over the place. They're wearing t-shirts, they're wearing colored vests, and they have these blowhorns. They've been organizing it from the beginning to the end, and the cost of this thing, Glenn, has got to be in the millions of dollars. It's unbelievable how clear it is that this thing was organized from the beginning. Now, this news report from Glenn Beck completely confirms what I said 6 months prior in early May. Now, let's move on. The Daily Caller actually reported on Vice President Pence, and he said in their article, Pence, Honduran president says Venezuela funding migrant caravan. And then, of course, there's a little WAPO clip. We're not going to watch that. And we're going to move to the quote here. The president of Honduras told me this was organized by leftist groups in Honduras and financed by Venezuela, Pence declared. A senior administration official confirmed to the Daily Caller a call took place between Hernandez and Pence regarding the migration situation. Now, here's the thing about this whole scenario is that it's not just one group. It's a coalition of groups. I want you to keep that in mind as well, because that's going to be important later. So, and again, this was a Pueblos Sin Fronteras created thing. There were hundreds of workers. They're hauling mobile hospitals. There's armies of trucks with food, water, and equipment. And again, it's a multi-million-dollar operation. Each one of these caravans, remember that, it's a multi-million-dollar operations. Now, here's the article that actually brought my attention to this, and I'll let you know kind of what triggered this whole video to begin with. And that's this one from the Gateway Pundit, reported on December 1st. It's entitled, Report, Paid Provocateurs to Lead Caravan Migrants in Storming the Border on Saturday. And it states, paid provocateurs are reported to be planning to lead caravan migrants in Tijuana in storming the El Chaparral border crossing Sunday morning in a replay of last Sunday's violent attack by rioting migrants that prompted a tear gas response from Border Patrol agents. Now, apparently, these people were organized by flyer. So it says, there's a flyer being distributed to migrants in the camp in Tijuana announcing the renewed effort to rush the border is time for the inauguration Saturday of the newly elected president of Mexico, Manuel López Obrador. Now, it says that the plans were reported by KUSI.com reporter John Soderman via social media and broadcast. Soderman said a federal officer told him about 600 migrants led by paid provocateurs are going to participate in the border rush to provoke a response from Border Patrol like last Sunday. Now, We're not going to read all this, but again, I'm going to touch on a couple things here. Okay. And of course, there's the lady that everybody in the news has been talking about. Clearly, she's fine. Now, this woman, Mother of the Year, she abandoned 4 of her children back in her home country and then took these other kids with her so that she could have this photo op. And again, they make it sound like it's hardship. It's a multi-million-dollar operation. They have mobile hospitals. They got food, water, and equipment. These people are basically probably living better in this caravan than they were probably living in their own countries. So with that in mind, let's move on. Now, here's a copy of the flyer. And this flyer, of course, is basically the one that was shot out. And you'll look at the bottom. It's in Spanish. But if you look at the bottom left-hand side, it says BAM. That's kind of interesting, huh? Let's talk about that a little bit. So it says a Google translation of an announcement on Facebook by the group whose name is on the flyer, BAM. They are lefties, so they are wordy. But it is important to know their propaganda is being spread to the migrants. Also know that apparently those twice there in the article, so let's skip that. So also know the end where they acknowledge they are using economic warfare to shut down the border crossing to hurt trade and businesses. Now I'm going to go ahead and skip around a little bit. BAM, Coalition to Defend Affirmative Action, Integration, and Immigrant Rights and Fight for Equality by Any Means Necessary. Now, of course, this is the advertisement for their march that was supposed to happen on December 1st, which, by the way, turned out to be a big flop. Apparently, nobody decided they wanted to get their ass kicked again by our Border Patrol. So good job for repelling them the first time, Border Patrol. Tear gas for everybody. Merry Christmas. Now, if you want to get a hold of BAM, here's their phone number on the flyer. It's area code 213-200-7377. Or you can email at bam.com. Or you can go to www.bam.com and you can join their BAM group on Facebook. Now, here's the thing that's interesting. So they're trying to pressure Mexico into getting the United States to accept all asylum seekers. But here's the other piece. They're using the migrants to push their agenda to get Trump out of office. Take a look. It says Trump out now, or it has to be removed by any means necessary. Now, they also talk about the first march. It turns out BAM was the organizers of the first march on November 25th when that attempted to rush the border. This was after Thanksgiving. Now, pardon me. It says, our march that closed the border has cost millions of dollars for the United States and Mexico. The success of the caravan's tactic of closing the border, stopping business as usual, and costing great economic losses to both countries is the reason why we must continue marching toward the border. Stopping business as usual and costing big economic losses to both countries is the reason why we must continue marching toward the border. They want to force a complete border shutdown. They are trying to provoke a response. Now, they go on. Our first march toward the border, which caused the closure of the sentry box, is already changing things in our favor. Now, here's the thing that's telling. We already know from our experience in Guatemala that in order to have to cross, it may take more than one attempt. In other words, BAM is admitting that they've been in this from the beginning. They're working hand in hand with Pueblos Sin Fronteras. They've already done this tactic in Guatemala. They forced all this shutdown. This tactic is rinse and repeat. This isn't the first time they've done this. How long is BAM? How long is Antifa? BAM is an Antifa organization. How long has BAM been working with Pueblos Sin Fronteras in their 15 years of smuggling migrants into the United States? That's a concern. That's an extreme concern. So let's go ahead and move on a little bit. But I think that the issue that I see here, what frustrates me about this is that they kind of admit, again, by going after Trump, they kind of admit that the caravan rushes are not for asylum. They're both to close the border down and they are to try to get these migrants in the United States to help them forcibly remove Trump from office. So bear that in mind, and that's a problem. So when you go to BAM's website, now obviously the Gateway Pundit people go, fake news. Well, let's go to BAM's website. Well, guess what? BAM even says on their own website at bam.com. Again, these links will be in the description of the video below. It says, open it up or we'll shut it down. Everyone must be let into the United States. And again, this was published on November 25th. This was the day of their first border rush. So we're going to scroll down. There's that piece right there. This is part of the flyer. Open it up or we'll shut it down. Everyone must be let in. Now, here's the thing. I downloaded that flyer. And so I'm going to go ahead and show that on the screen right now. And you should be able to see it here. We're going to find out in a moment. There we go. So this is the flyer that I downloaded. And you can see the bottom, it says, Trump must be removed, or I'm sorry, Trump must go or be removed by any means necessary. Okay, that's the flyer. That is the flyer. Okay, that should tell you everything you need to know. Again, this is not about trying to help people who are trying to seek asylum. This is about removing a legitimately elected, a democratically elected government from office. They don't have the bodies to do it, so they're trying to import revolutionaries from another country to make it happen. And again, they talk about how, for decades, Central American migrants have been forced to leave their countries of origin as a result of wars. Really? What wars? Tell me, when was the last time there was a war in Honduras? To my knowledge, there's no war going on right now. There's no war at all. So, this is an issue. They're sitting here and they're talking about, these are refugees. They're not refugees. They're economic migrants. They're in poverty. They even say that there's lack of jobs or anything else. Well, you know what? Maybe they should work with some industry and maybe they shouldn't adopt socialism. Look at what it did to Venezuela. It destroyed Venezuela as a country. Look at what socialism and feminism is doing in Sweden. It is destroying their country. Now, they do admit one thing. Migration has become a profitable business for the networks of smugglers and the gangs who exploit and prey on the migrants. Like, BAM and Pueblos and Fronteras and the Democrats and the Democratic Socialists and every other idiot that is trying to push for open borders. This is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, it's become profitable because they're using it as a photo op. It's propaganda, nothing more. All right, let's move on. Now, when we talk about Antifa, they talk a little bit about the origins of Antifa. And this is the Capital Research Center, America's investigative think tank. Now, they go into the origins of Antifa. And as you can see here, let me see if I can find the date on this article, if I can find it. Oh, there we go. It's April 16th, 2018. And I'm just going to, again, touch on the highlighted portions. You can read these full articles. They'll be in the description once this video is uploaded. Reports of Antifa violence are everywhere, which is why the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has quietly designated Antifa as domestic terrorists. So here we go. So in apparently right before April, or right around the time this article was published, the Department of Homeland Security designated Antifa, which means BAM, because BAM is an Antifa organization, as domestic terrorists. And it goes on here. Antifa is not a single organization. It is a movement or a coalition of leftist groups, each of which claims to combat fascism, a political ideology whose definition academics have been arguing about for decades. Despite the name, the movement embraces fascist tactics. So it says also, determining who funds Antifa is difficult because the movement is highly decentralized and consists of private individuals and loosely affiliated groups. Now, I want you to remember that because we're going to go into who funds BAM in a little while, okay? Now, nonetheless, the left-wing billionaire George Soros has ties to Antifa through a group called the Alliance for Global Justice. Soros's philanthropy, known at the time as the Open Society Institute, gave the Alliance for Global Justice $100,000, $50,000 in 2004, and $50,000 in 2006. Acting as a fiscal sponsor, the Alliance for Global Justice gave $50,000 to Refuse Fascism, an unincorporated Antifa group. Now, Refuse Fascism participated in rioting on February 1st, 2017. Now, you may remember this. This was the riot where they tried to get Milo Yiannopoulos to leave the building so they could basically whoop his ass outside. They basically shut down his talk. This was at the University of California, Berkeley. And again, the goal was to deplatform Milo Yiannopoulos. Now, the rioting caused more than $500,000 of damage. Okay? Now, here's the thing. We're going to move on. We know that Antifa are considered terrorists. Obviously, Newsweek had to follow up on this, so it's not just, what is that other organization? Let's go back here. It's not just the Capital Research Center. So Newsweek reported this on as well in September of 2017. So this was prior to the other article. It says, are Antifa terrorists? The feds have reportedly classified their activities as domestic terrorist violence. The Department of Homeland Security has formally classified the activities of anti-fascist groups, Antifa, as domestic terrorist violence since early 2016, according to confidential law enforcement documents obtained by Politico and interviews. Newly disclosed documents show authorities believed anarchist extremists were the main cause of violence at a number of public rallies. Interestingly enough, a lot of citizen journalists say the same thing. They go to these rallies, Antifa gets violent, and nobody does anything about it. Even the police stand down. A confidential 2016 joint intelligence assessment by DHS and the FBI blamed Antifa for attacks on a range of targets, including police, government institutions, and symbols of the capitalist system. Now, let's move on, because again, we know they're terrorists. We know that that's an issue. But then, we also basically, there was a book that was just published by Edward Klein, and this article was again from 2017 in October. And it's entitled, Exclusive U.S. Left-Wing Groups Traveled to Germany for the G20 Summit Last July to meet with al-Qaeda and ISIS leaders and plot the destruction of President Trump, secret FBI investigation reveals. So, again, not going to read the whole thing, just going to touch on it because I'm trying to time manage a little bit here. It reveals the FBI sent a task force to Germany to report on radical groups that plan to protest President Trump's attendance at this year's G20 Summit. There was also evidence that 3 key leaders of an Oakland group met in Hamburg with a leader of the al-Qaeda. A secret FBI investigation of the violent resistance movement on college campuses against President Trump has led to an alarming discovery. The collusion between American anarchists and foreign terrorists in the Islamic State and al-Qaeda, according to a confidential informational report by FBI field offices. The FBI report on efforts by Islamic terrorists to recruit followers among violent U.S. groups like Antifa corroborates President Trump's controversial claim. Last summer, the FBI dispatched a task force to Europe to report on massive demonstrations planned by radical groups, such as the German contingent of, I'm just going to call it Antifa because I'm not reading that shit. I don't speak German, so there you go. To protest President Trump's attendance at a meeting of leaders and central bank governors of the G20 group of major industrialized countries. The agents sent by the FBI paid particular attention to a group of anarchists from Oakland, a major port city that lies adjacent to the campus of the University of California at Berkeley, the scene of several violent protests. The ties between 3 leaders of the Oakland group, names redacted, met in Hamburg with a leader of AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and AQIM, the Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. The report continued, the leader from AQAP is an Egyptian-born male, name redacted, who is known to be in charge of finances and recruiting for the group. There is evidence from the informants that he is helping the Oakland group acquire weapons that they are seeking, primarily bomb-making equipment and toxic chemicals and gases. One of the men from Oakland traveled to Syria to meet with ISIS. The purpose was for training and tactics, but was thought to be primarily a bonding visit to discuss possible massive disruptive attacks in the U.S. All right? So this is an issue. Because basically Antifa met with ISIS and al-Qaeda in Germany to acquire weapons and bomb-making equipment, and then at least one of them traveled to Syria to get terrorist training. Okay, I don't know why nobody's doing anything about this. I don't know why that this person hasn't been arrested, even though this is like a serious concern, but it's a serious problem. And I'll tell you why. Because when we talk about illegal immigration and we talk about the dangers of open borders to our country, and we talk about the terrorism that is endemic there, the left likes to ignore it. They like to just say, oh, no, there's no terrorism. That's not a problem. But the reality is that there is. The Daily Caller reports that at least 15 known terrorists have been arrested trying to jump the southwest border. Now, what's important about this is they're not just terrorists, and this is like over like 15 years or something. But again, how many terrorists do you need to set a bomb up to kill hundreds of people? Really, you only need one. In fact, in the most notorious case, a Somali national was arrested in 2011 after being smuggled through Central America and Mexico into California. Sound familiar? This person was ordered deported by an immigration judge, but skipped bond and eventually crossed into Canada, where he went on to stab a police officer and run over pedestrians during an ISIS-inspired attack on Edmonton in September 2017. Now, that's a problem. That's a problem. You have these people smuggling terrorists into the country. Now, I'm also going to say this, and I'm not going to put those articles up. You can look them up for yourself. But they have also found numerous Bangladeshi illegal immigrants into the Southwest United States, from Texas to California. And a lot of these people come from regions known to harbor extremists in their own country, and they are hotbeds of terrorism. Look it up. It's there. Okay. And, the other side is that, I did a video back in July called When Entryism Becomes Terrorism. And I basically talk about how U.S. socialists promote violence against the government because they see the government as the oppressor. And they see anybody who disagrees with their leftist ideology as Nazis. And once you're labeled as a Nazi, any violence against you is justified. Again, I go into this in the video. These are their quotes, not mine. And just remember, all Antifa members are socialists and communists. So you need to think about that. When you're talking about Antifa, that's really what you're talking about. You're talking about socialists and communists. Now, CBS Denver reports, and this is in September 11th, so basically on the anniversary of 9/11, that 5 New Mexico compound suspects were indicted on federal charges. Now, you remember this one. This is the one where basically these people were running a terrorism camp for children. Federal prosecutors in New Mexico say the group was preparing for violent attacks on government, military, educational, and financial institutions. Now, again, they had children. They were training kids how to use weapons. It was a really, really bad scene. And then I'm going to go down here a little bit. Now, the reason I bring this up, where the highlighted portion is, it says LaVille. I think it's Janie LaVille. That's her first name. Now, she's been in the United States for more than 20 years after overstaying her non-immigrant visitor visa. So let me put that back into a concept where people can understand. This person's been in the United States. They're an illegal immigrant, and they were training children to be terrorists. And in this case, they were training her own children to be terrorists. Now, here's the other thing that's concerned about this too, is that one of the terrorists, I forget the guy's name, and I'm not going to look it up right now, but he kidnapped his child from Atlanta, Georgia, a 3-year-old child who was disabled. He kidnapped the child, brought the child to this terrorist camp, and then ended up killing the child. Now, because of the judge who let these people out on bail originally, the state judge, she was a Democrat, elected Democrat. She let them out, and she allowed the charges of murder against the boy. She allowed those to be dismissed. Now, I don't know if they've been refiled, but she should have never allowed the charges against murdering this 3-year-old boy to be dismissed. And why feminists aren't losing their shit about this is beyond me, because they found the little boy's body in the camp. Okay, the body of a 3-year-old child. Again, no murder charges. The murder charges were dropped. I don't see anything in the news that says that these charges have come back. And feminists are dead silent. They're dead silent. Now, here's the other piece. In moving, again, this is all about the illegal immigration piece and about how Antifa is helping illegal immigration, and they're helping drag terrorists in the United States to try to overthrow the Trump elected government. They hate capitalism. They hate anybody who's not a socialist, and it's a problem. Now, up till now, when people have been talking about, well, the protesters aren't paid. They're not paid. What are you talking about? Well, when enough evidence came forward, like we saw in the previous articles I covered here, that the protests were paid, finally, leftist news outlets admitted that the protesters were paid. And not only were they paid, but they were sponsored. If we can go down here, they were sponsored by a large leftist organization. So again, there is financing. It's top-down financing for these basically these protesters, these terrorists, these political, basically they're politically violent individuals. And it's extremely frustrating because, again, everybody acts like they can't do anything about it. And we're going to talk about some of the solutions in a little bit. But again, this is extremely frustrating. Now, here's the other thing that's even more concerning when we talk about the protesters being paid. They're like, okay, so what? Like I said, you look at the beginning of the article, it says, so what if the protesters are paid, right? Okay, you're right. Maybe people have, they can spend money however they want to, unless it's taxpayer money. So now we go back to the Gateway Pundit. And in October of this year, they report stunning photo evidence shows caravan migrants carrying U.S. aid bags paid for by U.S. taxpayers. Let's take a look at that. This is the bag. Okay, there's the migrants. There's the bag. That's from Twitter. Now, you look down here, it says breaking reports overnight tie the migrant caravan in Mexico working its way to the U.S. to billionaire George Soros, the man behind nearly every anti-American group working against the USA over the past decade. The migrant caravan coming up through Mexico is obviously funded by some far-left group. I wonder who that could be. The migrant caravan of mostly young men from all parts of the world were pictured receiving money from individuals embedded in the caravan. In other words, Pueblos Sin Fronteras, funded by Soros, funded by these left-wing organizations, and congratulations, funded by American tax dollars. This is a problem. And again, it says, let's address this photo first as we move forward. Why are these people carrying bags that say USAID? What is this organization? Well, let's talk about it. USAID defines itself as the world's premier international development agency and a catalytic actor driving development results. USAID's work advances U.S. national U.S. national security and economic prosperity, demonstrates American generosity, and promotes a path to recipient self-reliance and resilience. It also funds illegal immigration and apparently terrorism. Congratulations. That's what your tax dollars are paying for. They're paying for terrorism. All right? That's a problem. So, as we move forward and I talk about, the illegal human traffickers like Pueblos and Fronteras and Antifa and BAM and everything else, I did a video about some of this in November of this year called Human Traffickers File Frivolous Lawsuit. I talk about how the left supports illegal immigration because really their goal is to import voters to commit voter fraud. They want to have illegal immigrants vote. And I go into the video and I talk about how illegal immigrants and non-residents commit voter fraud with the support of Democrats. And the reality is that's true. Not only have I talked about it in my videos, but if you look at Project Veritas, they've talked about it as well. And they have undercover footage of these people admitting to voter fraud and admitting that that is the goal. In fact, when we talked earlier in this video about how BAM was trying to provoke a response from the right, provoke a response from the border to shut the border down. That's actually one of the tactics that Project Veritas talks about in its videos. These people actually admit to it. They say, look, we're trying to provoke a response from the other side. Basically, they want to play soundbite chicken, and they want to get sound bites and clips from Trump supporters and people who support the government so that they can support their narrative and go, oh, look, we're the victims, even though they admit to instigating the confrontation in the first place. Now, the reason I bring some of this up is because the illegal traffickers associated with Pueblos and Fronteras, associated with Soros, associated with the terrorist organization BAM, who's part of Antifa, they filed a lawsuit to stop immigration enforcement. Now, who's funding that lawsuit? Who pays for that lawsuit? And how's that lawsuit moving forward? I mean, that's a problem. And it was something that I didn't realize, the funding source anyway. I didn't realize who that was prior to making this video, prior to researching for this video, but I was so pissed off, I decided to dig in a little bit. And what I found was United for Equality and Affirmative Action Legal Defense Fund. Well, who the hell are these guys? Who are they? Well, look on the left, right there. UEAALDF is an affiliate of BAM. And highlighted. Affiliated with the college, high school, and middle school student organization BAM, Coalition to Defend Affirmative Action, Integration, and Immigrant Rights and Fight for Equality by Any Means Necessary. UEAALDF successfully conducts legal action and organizes protests to achieve its aim. Congratulations. Congratulations. You have a terrorist organization that's infiltrated college campuses, high school campuses, and middle school campuses all over the country. And then you wonder why millennials support socialism and communism and why they're so absolutely freaking violent. It's because they've been infiltrated by BAM. And again, they are using this organization to fund their lawsuits. Now, here's the thing. The leadership of that organization, Shanta Driver, that's her name. She's their national director, but she's also the national spokesperson for BAM. And she's been featured with Yvette Falarka, who we've seen before, who's been convicted of crimes against people at these protests. She's a violent protester, part of Antifa, part of BAM, one of their leaders. It's a problem. Now, here's the thing. How are they getting the money? Well, let's talk about that. You can go on their website and you can make a donation to BAM. You can. You can fund terrorism. You can do it. In fact, your donation to fund terrorism is tax deductible. But more importantly, PayPal allows you to fund terrorism. PayPal allows you to fund terrorism. That would explain why PayPal is like deplatformed Alex Jones. Alex Jones speaks against terrorism. PayPal clearly supports it. So what the fuck? Why not fund it? Why not facilitate the payments for terrorist activities that are anti-American? Why not? Why not? Even though Department of Homeland Security has designated them a terrorist organization. You can even donate frequent flyer miles used for travel, speaking engagements, and of course, terrorism. Now, who contributes to this BAM affiliate? Well, Kellogg Foundation, the Ford Foundation. And guess what? Oh my God, here's a surprise. The fucking Southern Poverty Law Center funds terrorism. Now, there's a surprise. There's a judge. There's a sitting judge. Judge Gregory Mathis funds terrorism. Why are you on the bench, Judge Mathis? If your goal, your responsibility is to support Americans and the U.S. Constitution, and yet you violate that by funding terrorism. And then we have this leftist entryist organization called the Center for Constitutional Rights. Terrorism is not a constitutional right. Bowling Green State University, several departments fund terrorism. Congratulations, your taxpayer dollars are funding terrorism. Women's Law Students Association are funding terrorism. Congratulations, feminists are funding terrorism. And Wilma Chan, elected official to the California State Assembly, majority leader, funds terrorism. Now, that's not including all the rest of them here. You know, we've got the Impact Fund, the Detroit Federation of Teachers. All these unions are funding terrorism. And congratulations, they're funding terrorism with the help of PayPal. That's the reality. That's the reality. BAM is a terrorist Antifa organization. PayPal facilitates those contributions to them. And on top of that, all these big organizations are doing that. And again, Southern Poverty Law Center. Is there any confusion here? Southern Poverty Law Center, a trusted flagger for YouTube. They are working with Facebook. They are working with Twitter. They are working with Discord to censor Americans' free speech rights all across the internet. Of course, they're in bed with terrorists. Of course, they are designated on their website. They are designating conservative groups as terrorist organizations. This is why a few years ago, the FBI disavowed them, because they are absolutely un-American. And now we have evidence right here on their own website. Again, this is all public information. The links will be in the description. We have evidence of Southern Poverty Law Center linked to a terrorist organization. Okay. Now, this isn't the first time the Southern Poverty Law Center has been linked to a terrorist organization. They actually had a list of of hate groups that they had listed. And apparently some terrorist shooter got together and he used their hate group list as his target list. Okay, this again is in the news. I'm not going to report on it today. It's something that I just remembered. Again, we're doing this video in one take, so you can't handle it, get over it. But again, Southern Poverty Law Center, funding terrorism. There you go, right there, black and white. Now, how do we handle this? How do we resolve it? Everybody, okay, these are the facts here, right? Everybody's been reporting on the facts. Everything that I've talked about has already been reported in the news. Everybody's already discussed it. But have they? I mean, everybody's talking about the problem. Everybody is addressing this, but not very many people are talking about the solutions. So let's have that conversation now. Well, this is something that I know that Trump has been thinking about. And the reason that I know Trump has been thinking about it is because he entered in Executive Order 13848 on September 12th of 2018. Let me just kind of read a couple excerpts from this order. It says, I, Donald Trump, President of the United States of America, find that the ability of persons located in whole or in substantial part outside the United States to interfere in or undermine public confidence in the United States elections, including through the unauthorized accessing of election and campaign infrastructure or the covert distribution of propaganda and disinformation, constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. Well, you know, it's interesting that he brings that up because I've actually made videos talking about the same goddamn thing. Let's move on. I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with this threat. Accordingly, I hereby order, not later than 45 days after the conclusion of a United States election, The Director of National Intelligence, in consultation with the heads of any other appropriate executive departments and agencies, shall conduct an assessment of any information indicating that a foreign government or any person acting as an agent of or on behalf of a foreign government has acted with the intent or purpose of interfering with that election. Now, we're going to move down a little bit. What is this? This is a sanction. So what does this sanction do? Again, this thing is titled Imposing Certain Sanctions in the Event of Foreign Interference in a United States Election. So what sanctions are they imposing? Let's talk about those. All property and interests in property that are in the United States that hereafter come within the United States or that are or hereafter come within the possession or the control of any United States person of the following persons are blocked. Now, basically, it says, I'll just continue reading. And may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt with in any foreign person determined by the Secretary of Treasury in consultation with the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of Homeland Security to have directly or indirectly engaged in, sponsored, concealed, or otherwise been complicit in foreign interference in a United States election, or to have materially assisted, sponsored, or provided financial, material, or technological support for, or goods or services to, or in support of any activity described in subsection A1 of this section, or any persons whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order, or to be owned or controlled by, or to have acted or purported to act for, or on behalf of, directly or indirectly, any person whose property or interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order. It's a lot of fucking legalese. Let's just be real, okay? Basically, anybody, any organization who has interfered with an election in the United States on behalf of any foreign government or entity, they can have all their assets locked down completely. Now let's move on and let's talk about some of the definitions, because basically what this is saying is it's blocking all property and asset interests, okay? Now, let's talk about these definitions. For purposes of this order, the term person means any individual or entity. The term entity means a partnership, association, trust, joint venture, corporation, group, subgroup, or other organization. Like, I don't know, Antifa, the Democratic Party, BAM. And again, it could be a partnership. It could be a corporation. Like, I don't know, PayPal, Google, Facebook, Twitter. I don't know. Let's go full ham. Those are all covered under that definition. Let's talk about foreign interference for a second. The term foreign interference with respect to an election includes any covert, fraudulent, deceptive, or unlawful actions or attempted actions of a foreign government or of any person acting as an agent of or on behalf of a foreign government. I want you to remember that. Remember that for later, because we're going to talk about agent of a foreign government, okay? Undertaken with the purpose or the effect of influencing, undermining confidence in, or altering the result or reported result of the election, or undermining public confidence in election processes or institutions. Now, the term foreign government means any national, state, provincial, or other governing authority, any political party, or any official of any governing authority or political party, in each case of a country other than the United States. So, what's that mean? What's that last part mean? That means if there's a political party located outside the United States and they interfere with an election, you can sanction them. You can sanction them. You can sanction any property interest associated with them. Like, I don't know, let's just say if there's a international communist party or a socialist party that's located and these people are connected, or I don't know, maybe Antifa working with Al-Qaeda or working with ISIS. You can sanction all those people. You can sanction PayPal for funding terrorist acts. All these people could be sanctioned as a result of this. This order is extremely far-reaching, which is surprisingly because nobody in the mainstream media reported on this. Nobody a couple people talked about it really briefly, but it wasn't front page news anywhere. And nobody on YouTube, to my knowledge, discussed it. Now, let's move on and let's talk about this because this is also important on this next piece. You see, on the 20th of September, let me say that again. On the 20th of September, President Trump issued Executive Order 13849. Now, this order prohibits financial transactions against sanctioned persons, including those covered by the prior executive order. Okay. And that's kind of what this blah, blah, blah here. It says prohibit any transactions in foreign exchange that are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. And I'm going to try to limit the whole legalese piece of it for you because holy shit, I have a hard time reading it and I'm trying to do this in one take. Now, it also says prohibits any transfers of credit or payments between financial institutions or by or through any financial institution to the extent that such transfers or payments are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and involved any interest of the sanctioned person. Block all property interests or interests in property of the sanctioned person that are in the United States that hereafter come within the United States or that are or hereafter come within the possession or the control of any United States person. Now, we're going to kind of skip this a little bit too, because here's the one that's really, really fun and important. Okay. It's part B here. B is in Bravo. It says, the making of any contribution or provision of funds, goods, or services by, to, or for the benefit of any sanctioned person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order, and the receipt of any contribution or provision of funds, goods, or services from any such sanctioned person. So let's break this down. What that means is that you can't contribute to Antifa. They're terrorists. You can't contribute to anybody who should be sanctioned by the United States. So any type of contribution, any type of funding source, anything like that, basically what he's saying is any financial institution that's there, you got to lock those funds down. You can't transfer. You can't Visa, no MasterCard, nothing. No PayPal, no Google Pay, no Google Wallet, nothing. It all gets shut down. That probably includes Patreon as well. So if Patreon is funding Antifa, Patreon, you better pay attention because you're in violation of this executive order 13849. So something to think about. Now, these are just the executive orders. Now, are there any other ways that as United States citizens, as law-abiding citizens, that we can talk about that we can hold these people accountable before everybody gets upset and we degenerate into a civil war? Yeah, the answer is yes. Now, unfortunately, I see a civil war coming no matter what, just because Antifa, leftist organizations, and people who hate the United States, they've infiltrated us at all levels of government. I mean, you look at like James Comey from the FBI, that man is absolutely anti-American. And he did his best to cover up the crimes of Hillary Clinton, which were at a national security level. So this is a problem. But with that in mind, my goal, hopefully, is to continue a civilized society, to continue a civil society, a law-abiding society, and to try to stop this before it degenerates. And I'm hoping that this video will contribute to that. So with that in mind, let's continue to talk about some of the solutions that might be here. Okay? So first thing we want to discuss here is U.S. Code 18, subsection 2385. Now, I've talked about this before in a prior video. This is advocating for the overthrow of government. Now, this goes on and on and on. And basically what it says is that anybody who knowingly, well, let's just read the highlighted portions. Whoever knowingly or willfully advocates, abets, advises, or teaches the duty, necessity, desirability, or propriety of overthrowing or destroying the government of the United States or the government of any state by force or violence, the assassination of any officer of any such government, whoever with the intent to cause the overthrow or destruction of any such government prints, publishes, edits, issues, circulates. Are you listening, Google? Are you listening, YouTube? Are you listening, Facebook? Are you listening, Twitter? Are you listening, mainstream media? Because that's what they're talking about here. Okay? Prints, publishes, edits, issues, circulates, sells, distributes, or publicly displays any written or printed matter advocating, advising, or teaching the duty, necessity, desirability, or propriety of overthrowing or destroying any government in the United States by force or violence or attempts to do so. Whoever organizes or helps to organize any society or group, like, I don't know, Antifa, Democratic Socialists, the list goes on and on. How about going in and trying to take over these unions and get them to fund BAM, like basically BAM's website showed us. Any group, assembly of persons who teach, advocate, or encourage the overthrow or destruction of any such government by force or violence, or becomes a member of or affiliates with any such society, group, or assembly as a person, knowingly knowing the purposes thereof. In other words, like Keith Ellison, the DNC guy who was hanging out with Antifa. Okay. You affiliated with him. Congratulations. You're now guilty of a crime. You can be fined under this title, and you could be in prison for 20 years. And more importantly, you'll be ineligible for employment by the United States or any department or agency thereof. That might include, I don't know, employment as a college professor, employment at the Department of Justice, employment at the FBI. James Comey, I'm talking to you, and any other FBI treasonous bastard that's out there. Okay? I mean, this is the type of thing we're talking about. This is the law right here. Subsection 2385, advocating overthrow of government. Okay. Now I know that the Department of Justice, and I think it was like the Office of White House Counsel or somebody said, look, if you have like resist Trump on your bumper sticker, you could be fired for your job. Fuck fired. Throw them in jail for 20 years. Throw them in jail for 20 years and fine them. You do that to about a dozen people, and all of a sudden, all the retards on the left sober up. You put the head on the pike so everybody can see, and everybody goes, ooh, maybe I don't want to end up like that idiot. That didn't look like a good idea. Now, let's move on. As used in this section, the term organizes or organize with respect to any society, group, or assembly of persons include the recruiting of new members, forming new units, and the regrouping or expansion of existing clubs, classes, or other units of such society, group, or assemblies of person. Like, I don't know, all the BAM organizations at the junior high level or the high school level or the college level or the Antifa groups or the socialist organizations. I mean, this law is pretty broad and far reaching. Why are we not using it? Why is it that when you go to and you see these protests on TV and the people get arrested and charged for being politically violent, why are they not being charged with this federal crime for advocating the overthrow of government instead of being charged for disorderly conduct and being slapped on the wrist? Okay, that's a problem. That's a problem. Our government officials need to grow a fucking pair, and they need to figure it out. They're there to protect the people. They are not there to protect the criminal. That's what we have a Department of Public Defense for. That's what we have private defense attorneys for. The government should not be doing the defense's job for them. Let's move on. Now, there's been some talk about bringing in U.S. troops and saying, look, the Posse Comitatus Act limits using U.S. troops on American soil, and a lot of people have been talking about. They're like, ha ha ha! You can't use the military, and the cops won't side with you. We live in a sanctuary city. We live in a sanctuary state. And the reality is that they're right. U.S. Code 10, subsection 275, actually has restrictions on direct participation by military personnel. In fact, it says under pertinent part here, it says. The Secretary of Defense shall prescribe such regulations as be necessary to ensure that any activity under this chapter does not include or permit direct participation by a member of the Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marine Corps in search, seizure, arrest, or similar activity. However, there's a part that these leftist idiots forgot, and it's usually they always forget the last paragraph or the last statement. And that statement here is, unless participation in such activity by such member is otherwise authorized by law. Now, why is that important? Well, let's talk about this. It's important because of U.S. Code 10, subsection 253.1, which, for purposes of our conversation, is interference with state and federal law. Let's read that. Interference with state and federal law. The president, by using the militia or the armed forces. See, Posse Comitatus doesn't apply. Or both, or by any other means, shall take such measures as he considers necessary to suppress in a state any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy if it so hinders the execution of the laws of that state and of the United States within the state, that any part or class of its people is deprived of a right, privilege, immunity, or protection named in the Constitution and secured by law, and the constituted authorities of that state are unable, fail, or refuse, I'm talking to you, City of Portland, to protect that right, privilege, or immunity, or to give that protection, or opposes or obstructs the execution of the laws of the United States. And I'm talking to sanctuary cities and states here. Again, sanctuary cities and states, pay attention. or impedes the course of justice under those laws. In any situation covered by Clause 1, the state shall be considered to have denied equal protection of the laws secured by the Constitution. And for those people who are not constitutional scholars, that's the 14th Amendment. Okay? So with that said, let's talk about what this really means here and how one might actually use this. Okay? What this means is that the president could use troops to stop domestic terrorism. If the states won't stop domestic terrorism, like Antifa riots or political violence against, Caucasian heterosexual supporters of Trump, again, because if you look at it, it's class of its people, right? Deprived of protection, like the white people who've been targeted. Okay, President Trump can bring in troops to protect those people. All right. President Trump, based on everything that I've talked about here, can use troops to enforce immigration laws to protect our election infrastructure. Now, we know that illegal immigrants are being imported into the United States to fraudulently take over the elections to give Democrats the appearance of legitimate power through election fraud. President Trump can use those troops to enforce immigration laws to protect the country from terrorism. We already know that the illegal immigration caravans are being supported by BAM. BAM has been designated a terrorist organization. You can bring the military in there and you can just be like, hey, y'all are fucked. And that's the reality. Okay? They can use military troops to stop protests and riots. Antifa protests and riots, since Antifa has been declared terrorist by Homeland Security. Now, when I talk about terrorists, let's talk about terrorism. I mean, everybody talks about the violence and, they're not being violent. Well, guess what? Even basically the Chinese agent who's building their censored search engine, Google, admits terrorism is the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. This is exactly what Antifa is doing. They are attempting to harass, they are attempting to intimidate, they are committing violence, they are inspiring others to commit violence, and they are inspiring others to commit violence to advocate the overthrow of government in violation of federal law. And President Trump, without any request from any governor or any legislature in any state, can bring in military troops and protect our Constitution and protect the people who live there from terrorism. Okay. Now, this may sound hyperbolic. It really might. And I understand that. But if you look at like the assault on Tucker Carlson's home, that was terrorism. That was political violence, political intimidation in pursuit of a political aim. Okay. Harassing elected officials at restaurants. Threats of harassment of government officials anywhere. That's terrorism. Under the definition, that is terrorism. That's even the leftist definition of terrorism, which, by the way, is the most conservative definition of terrorism. The legal version of terrorism encompasses all of that and more. And the reality is, we're seeing terrorism all the way across the country. Breitbart reports that over 639 acts of media-approved political violence and harassment against Trump supporters. And I think this is just for in the last year. It might have been since 2016. But let's talk about this a little bit. It says, when not calling Trump supporters Nazis as a means to dehumanize us, the establishment media like to whine about the lack of civility in American politics, even as they cover up, ignore, downplay, or straight up approve of the wave of violence and political harassment we are seeing against supporters of President Trump. Let's just not be civil about this. Let's just be blunt for a second, okay? What they're talking about is talking about terrorism. They're talking about terrorism. Mainstream media, some of these mainstream media outlets, they are publishing terrorism. They are advocating for the overthrow of government. And it even says, publishes, prints, edits, issues, circulates, sells, or distributes. Okay. All these articles that are saying down with the government, all these articles that are pro-Antifa, all these articles that are pro-illegal immigration, they are supporting terrorism. They are supporting the overthrow, the violent overthrow of our government. That's the reality. Let's not sugarcoat it. Let's not tiptoe through the tulips. Let's not bullshit anymore. Let's talk about what this really is. This is terrorism, and it's been going on for 2 years because these leftists thought they were going to take control of the government with the election of Hillary. Hillary couldn't even fill a high school gymnasium during the 2016 election, and yet she thought she was going to be the most powerful woman in the free world. That's a problem. Again, even by Google's own definition, this is terrorism. Now, we talked a little bit earlier, and I talked about agents of foreign governments. Let's talk about that for a second. The reality is this. Google's censored search engine for China is sparking a moral crisis within the company. Why? Because they're creating a censored search engine for the government of China. They are acting as a foreign agent. They have been censoring conservative commentators. They have been censoring the algorithm to change the search results. They're other company that works with Google, YouTube. I mean, obviously they're the same company, but they broke up in and created Alphabet as the umbrella company so that they could head off antitrust action. And that's the only reason they did it. They didn't do it for finance. They did it so they wouldn't be split with an antitrust act. But really, Alphabet controls this. It's the same agenda. It's just a different name. Okay, but YouTube is censoring conservative voices. They are interfering with an election. And frankly, they fall under this sanctions here, under 1348 and Executive Order 1349. They are agents of a foreign government. They are trying to change our election system. Okay, they've used algorithmic censorship. They have used selective enforcement to target conservatives and supporters of the Trump government. And Twitter and Facebook have done the same. This is political intimidation, and by Google's own definition, it is terrorism. It violates U.S. law, and I believe it subjects them to the sanctions included in the both executive orders in this video. So really, at the end of the day, what can we do? Frankly, we can pressure our elected officials and the federal government officials that work for us. We can contact them, and we can tell them basically what you need to do. At the end of the day, you need to grow a set. You need to grow a pair, and you need to start supporting Americans first. It is American taxpayer dollars that pay your wages. It is American taxpayer dollars that if you continue giving them to illegal immigrants, if you continue to fund terrorists, if you continue to fund people who hate our country, you won't have a job. And if you're a male feminist, guess what? You get the knife too. Look at the hashtag #MeToo movement, okay? Feminists use all these male feminists, and then when they were done with them, they Me Too'd all of them and destroyed their lives. Okay? We could use the executive orders included in this video to seize all contributions to all groups supporting or defending illegal immigration. And we can use that money to build the wall. Now, we don't need congressional approval for the funds for the wall if this is done through executive order using seized funds. Then we can use the executive orders to sanction PayPal. Again, remember PayPal? They were helping facilitate donations of funds to the terrorist organization BAM. Freeze their assets and shut them down. We have an executive order in place right now that can do it. All right? Then we take U.S. troops and we raid the offices of Google, Facebook, and Twitter and seize every fucking thing as part of a terrorism investigation of these groups for their attempt to assist in the overthrow of the U.S. government and to wrongfully influence elections since the states are refusing to do so. Google's already admitted that they are an agent of the Chinese government. They've already admitted that they have a left-leaning bias. They've already admitted that they have a plan to try to go after right-wing and conservative people. They lost their shit when Trump got elected. All right? They've admitted their bias. They've admitted they're working for the Chinese government. Send the troops in and shut them down. Go into every Google office, every data center, everywhere, and just be like, fuck you and the horse you killed to get here. You are un-American. Let me show you what patriotism looks like. Now, remember, when we talk about that, we talk about Twitter, we talk about Facebook, and we talk about Google. What we're talking about is very, very clearly advocating for the overthrow of government. Remember, whoever with intent to cause the overthrow or destruction of any such government prints, publishes, edits, issues, circulates, sells, distributes, or publicly displays any written or printed matter advocating, advising, or teaching the duty, necessity, desirability, or propriety of overthrowing or destroying any government in the United States by force or violence or attempts to do so is guilty of a federal crime. When Google, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook publicly display material advocating and teaching the duty and desirability of overthrowing the U.S. government by force or violence, they are in violation of federal law, and they are undermining our constitutional electoral process and are allowing racists to target white heterosexual supporters of our Constitution, and the states refuse to protect these groups from the political violence inspired by big tech publications. And that's the reality. We need to grow a set. We need to tell our government officials, look, we will pay for your prescription to grow a set of balls, to enforce our laws, to stop terrorists like Antifa from helping illegal immigrants commit voter fraud in our country. Now, I'm not saying for a second that immigration is bad, but we used to be a country where we would push for the best and the brightest. And now the best and the brightest are demonized. And they want socialism to run the United States. And liars always lie. The Democrats have lied for too long. And they've been allowed to get away with it because tradcons and other conservatives who are elected officials need to grow a set. Look, these people, they don't want to negotiate with you. They don't want to give you an inch. So they're going to wait for you to compromise. If you are an elected official listening to this, they are waiting for you to compromise because they think that you think that politics are politics as usual. This is the challenge of our generation. This is the defining moment of our generation. Does our government defend the Constitution? Does our military defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic? Do we, as American citizens, defend our free speech rights, our right to bear arms, and our other constitutional rights that are granted to us under the United States Constitution? Or do we let cucked politicians and terrorists and communists and socialists supported by the Democrats, elected officials, by our colleges and everybody else, because I'll tell you what, they have infiltrated all levels of government. Do we let those people take over and destroy our country and turn it into the next Venezuela? California is already leftist and socialist. Look at it. I call it dog shitistan for a reason. Okay? It is a socialist paradise, and the Democrats run it. It is completely leftist, and you know what? It has the worst income inequality of the entire country. They have this year. They've had typhus epidemics. They've had cold and flu epidemics. They had a hepatitis A epidemic. They have record amount of homeless people. It's gotten so bad that San Francisco and other cities have had to create poop patrols because there's shit all over their sidewalks, like some of the worst third world countries out there. These are the values that these people are pushing forward. If we don't contact our government officials and demand that they enforce federal law, either with law enforcement and stop the advocating of overthrowing our government, and they can't get law enforcement to do it, bring in our troops. Bring in our troops. We have the statutes to cover it. Bring in our troops. We don't need congressional approval to do it. Okay, what they're doing is they're creating insurrection. They're creating domestic violence against people who live in the country. They've committed over 600 acts of terrorism against Trump supporters. How many more people in our country need to be victimized before people wake up and realize the terrorism is just in front of their face? Because if we don't wake up soon, we won't have a United States to wake up to. I'm DDJ, and this has been your dose of misandry today.